Hey darlings. The door to the director's office was slightly open, but Vyacheslav Sergeevich himself was not there. Vika hesitated a little before going in, but he himself said clearly, "Go in and get the blue folder." Just a few months ago, she wouldn't have dared to do that. After all, before that, the girl worked here as a simple cleaning lady. And now she is a personal assistant to the director of a famous advertising agency. Such a rapid rise in the office career path no longer surprised anyone. Everyone was already accustomed to this and even considered this order of things quite reasonable. And Vika herself believed that she was simply very lucky and that the long, dark series of problems in life was already behind her. In the hectic flow of Victoria's latest events, more and more rarely, she remembered that difficult period of her life, when, crushed and destroyed under the weight of difficult circumstances, she stood in the corridor of the office center and cried bitterly, believing that her life is over. The series of misfortunes began with Kostya. Kostya, so dear and beloved. It was he who broke her heart and trampled on the soul of the tender girl. They dated for almost 3 years. During this period, their relationship evolved from lively and noisy parties to quiet home gatherings watching TV over tea. Acquaintances and friends were increasingly interested in finding out when the wedding would take place, and young people were not at all embarrassed by these questions. They had such a good and peaceful relationship that pleased both of them that there was no need to think about anything else. It turns out they had the same rare blood type. Well, of course, it's destiny. Kostya's mother, Aunt Anya, accepted her son's girlfriend as her own, became friends with her future father-in-law, and visited her often. Vika always dreamed of a strong and friendly family. After all, her parents didn't have a good life together. The father left for another woman when the girl was 10 years old. The endless family quarrels and scandals that preceded the divorce deeply hurt her. Pretending to be asleep, through her tears, she heard her parents' mutual reproaches, swear words and rude words coming from the kitchen. At first, Dad took her home strictly once a month, on every Sunday. He would take them to the park for fun rides or to the cinema to watch some family comedy. Then they would eat delicious ice cream and talk for a long time. Subsequently, these meetings became less and less frequent. The father had a son in the new family and had practically no time for his eldest daughter. "You are an adult, Vikusia. You should understand everything," he inspired her over the phone, once again canceling another joint event. The girl understood, but that didn't calm my soul. Soon their communication was completely reduced to banal congratulations on the holidays. "No, everything will be different for me," Vika thought naively. "If I get married, then once and for all." Therefore, having met a nice and correct guy in all respects, Kostya, she looked closely at him for a long time before making a fateful decision for herself. "Yes, this is the man of my dreams, my only one." From now on, she no longer doubted that she had already made the most important choice in her life. All that remains is to formalize the relationship, and here they are. A happy family with 2 children, a dacha outside the city, and hiking every summer. True, Kostya always found compelling reasons not to rush things. For example, he believed that Vika should definitely graduate from university and study. "We will always have time to get married," he reasoned. "First we need to get up and then everything else." Such arguments seemed quite logical. The girl agreed with his opinion and resignedly continued to wait for a happy moment. But after 2.5 years of relationship, the future groom changed drastically. More and more often he left Vika alone, meeting with friends and explaining his behavior by inviting him to purely male companies, without girlfriends and wives. Now, whenever we met, he would get irritated for all sorts of reasons. Everything that previously pleased and satisfied him now seemed wrong and unnecessary to the guy. Vika silently suffered from his endless complaints and complaints, leading her to wild complexes. Maybe she really isn't good enough for Kostya? and simply a strange, average-looking incompetence. And she did her best to live up to her beloved and be the best for him. She carefully took care of her appearance and hairstyle, torturing herself with hunger so that, in her opinion, nothing unnecessary appeared on her body. Time passed. The guy's claims gradually disappeared. Now he smelled of intense cold and indifference. Vika couldn't take it anymore, and one fine day she pressed him against the wall and challenged him to a frank conversation. And only then did Kostya finally admit that he had been dating a married woman for several months. The girl, stunned by this confession, felt as if the heart in her chest was filled with hot metal and had completely stopped beating. How is it possible to be in love with two people at the same time? And who is this viper? Is there no other way to say it? Who stole from her, Vikina, the love of her life while her husband was alive? The unhappy and depressed girl was hurt to the point of crying. His soul suddenly felt disgusting and sad. But Vika did not want to create scandals and hysteria. Using her parents' example, she remembered how ugly it looked on the outside. In any situation, you need to maintain dignity. She said with a straight face that she didn't want to see him anymore, turned and left, raising her chin proudly. It was later that she suffered in her room, sobbing into her pillow for several nights in a row. Mom periodically tiptoed to the door and silently persuaded, "Well, daughter, to go out. I made your favorite pies with cabbage. Let's at least have some tea. You didn't eat anything." You can't deceive a mother's heart. Although Vika chose not to tell her anything, relying on some sixth sense, the woman guessed everything and was very worried about her daughter. The silent scream of her dear blood reaching her tore her soul to pieces. The woman suffered with her and seemed to want to take on all the problems and sadness of her only daughter. My mother had suffered from hypertension for a long time, but excessive worries completely undermined her fragile health. Early in the morning, Vika woke up to a low sound. After listening, she realized that her mother was calling her from her room. The girl jumped up and, with what she was wearing, ran towards him. A pale, frightened woman sat on the bed. "Vikusia, there is something wrong with me," she whispered when she saw her daughter. She spoke slurred, as if her mouth was full of porridge. "I can't feel most of the left side of my body, and I can't move my hand. Oh, Lord." Vika was alarmed and ran to her mother. "How could this be? Mom, when was the last time you took your blood pressure?" Tears came to the girl's eyes and she sobbed loudly. "Are you really going to cry?" my mother asked in a calm voice, clenching her fists. "You better call the emergency room." Mom was taken to the hospital and diagnosed. Simply put, a mini-stroke. Expensive and long-term treatment and rehabilitation were required. Matters of the heart instantly took a back seat. The girl was overwhelmed by a wave of new difficult concerns. A hospital, a pharmacy, a rehabilitator. There was a catastrophic lack of money. Victoria understood that she needed to look for a job urgently. What about studying? "I will have to say goodbye to my studies for now. Maybe someday she will finish her studies, or maybe she will get a job in life without a degree. The health and life of a loved one are more important." The girl already had 3 years of university and several Olympic prize certificates in her hands, and Victoria did not doubt for a moment that such a promising specialist would definitely be hired by any large company. She imagined an ambitious professional future. Having studied the vacancies offered in the city, and not wanting to be distracted by trifles, she rushed to the largest office center, where at least 3 companies were recruiting new workers with criteria suitable for her. Inspired, with shining eyes, she appeared in this majestic kingdom of concrete and glass, reminiscent of a buzzing beehive, with swarms of bees on the faces of employees and visitors, constantly running around the floors with a worried expression on their faces and folders in their hands. In the first room, the head of the department studied her CV for a long time, looking impartially into the girl's eyes, as if she wanted to read all her thoughts, even the most hidden ones. She asked a lot of questions, mostly related to the experience. Victoria responded with joy and honesty. Yes, she didn't work, but she learned quickly and got top marks at university. The arrogant woman immediately gave her a dissatisfied look, uttered the standard phrase that they would call her back, and didn't even get up to say goodbye to her. They won't call back. The applicant understood immediately. Leaving the office, Vika sighed in disappointment. Where did she go wrong? What did you do wrong? This job suited her very well, and the pay was good. But there was no time to get upset. The girl shook herself and got all unpleasant thoughts out of her head. Failures happen to everyone. It's okay. She still has options. But other companies didn't even want to talk to her. What? Without experience? No, we do not hire interns. There is still time to waste with you. But you will give up and give up? So no. They told her right at the door. Incomplete higher education seemed to employers to be a kind of sign of a person's failure. No one wanted to hear explanations or understand the circumstances. From office to office, hopes and aspirations melted like the first snow. After another categorical refusal, Vika was about to cry right here in the hallway. What to do? How will she look into the eyes of her mother, whom she convinced this morning that finding a job wouldn't be difficult? And the unpaid bills keep piling up, and it's already embarrassing to borrow money from friends? A lump rose in my throat with resentment and despair, and tears were about to spill from my eyes. Trying to control her emotions, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyelids. A young brunette who was passing by stopped and took a closer look at the pale girl. What's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell? She asked in a sympathetic tone. This question unexpectedly acted as a trigger. It was no longer possible to hold back the tears. Vika sobbed loudly and began to cry, covering her face with her hands. God, what happened? The stranger was seriously alarmed. Only abrupt sentences were heard from the palms. To work? No one hires. Mom is sick. The black-haired girl touched his shoulder sympathetically and asked, Who do you want to work with? Vika took her hands off her reddened, wet face, began to feverishly wipe away her tears, trying to calm down and, stuttering, replied, I wanted to be a secretary or an assistant, but I don't care. She sighed heavily. The brunette smiled sweetly and said in a cheerful voice, Well, tears are no solution. Come with me. She grabbed Victoria by the elbow and pulled her gently. On the way they met. The nice girl's name was Katia. She worked for a well-known advertising production company. They were now heading to his huge office. The agency occupied an entire wing of the floor. Young, energetic employees ran down the hall going about their business, casting curious glances in Vika's direction as they went. In the office where Katia brought her, an overweight, middle-aged blonde with lush, carefully combed hair was slowly watering the flowers. There were at least 3 dozen of them here. Tall, well-kept fig trees, with dark, shiny leaves, scattered dracaenas, blooming orchids and violets near the window transformed the small room into a charming mini greenhouse. Maria Vasilyevna, hello, dear. Katia greeted in her own way. I have $1 million deal with you. She greeted the uninvited guests with a dissatisfied look and immediately frowned picturesquely. You, Katia, only come to a sick old woman on business. No, just to come in and have some tea, she grumbled, placing the watering can on the windowsill. Katia, not paying attention to these offended murmurs, jumped up and gently hugged the huge woman by the shoulders, and Vic explained, This is our mother, Musia. She takes care of us and sometimes even gives us a salary, she laughed and added. She is so strict in appearance, but in reality, she is the kindest person in the world. You will say the same, she murmured, but her face softened and immediately acquired a satisfied expression. Portraying a pitiful puppy dog appearance, Katia asked her in a soulful voice. Muzeka, she's a good girl, she knows languages, but she hasn't finished college yet. Maybe we have somewhere for her? At least temporarily. Where can I find a place for you? She was indignant. Vyacheslav Sergeevich strictly prohibited hiring without higher education and experience. He doesn't want to worry. He just needs geniuses. Katia whimpered funny, pretending to be an unhappy puppy, and asked insinuatingly in a slurred voice, Well, maybe at least something, please. Fat Maria Vasilyevna cleared her throat, pressed her bulky body into a chair, and thought, I can hire you as a cleaner. We have been needing an employee for a long time. Otherwise, the office cleaner will be completely lazy. I've worked on all the floors, but now I don't have time. And then we'll see, she said, looking closely at the newcomer. Satisfied, Katia quickly turned to her protégé and winked mischievously. Are you going to work as a cleaner for now? Vika liked it here more and more. The agency itself, the people and the atmosphere. She nodded with a smile. Okay, give me the documents. The elderly lady ordered busily and finally gave the two girls a warm, motherly look. Well, Katia rejoiced as soon as they left the office. There is always a way out. You should never despair. She showed the new employee around the huge office. It consisted of several departments. Katia worked in a creative group. The guys were happy and unique, with an original way of seeing things. They came up with new ideas in batches. Just be sure to write it down. Everyone else treated them with respect and called them creative. It's a shame Sonia left us recently, Katia noted with sadness in her voice. What a talent. Vyacheslav Sergeevich did not want to give up. Because you left? Asked Vika. The girl shrugged vaguely. He said his ideas were stolen. I don't know where he got it from. This entire complex mechanism was controlled by Director Vyacheslav Sergeevich. Above him was just a mythical board of directors, which no one had ever seen. So he personally controlled everything and everyone. Vyacheslav Sergeevich turned out to be a young man of about 30, short and muscular, with a tenacious and penetrating gaze. He immediately noticed the new employee. Maria Vasilyevna hired you instead of greeting, he sternly asked Vika. She shrank and nodded fearfully, and the boss confidently walked into the finance department. From behind the door, a few sentences reached the cleaning lady. I asked you not to hire extra people. The thick baritone was indignant. Whoever washes the floor will soon be completely covered in dust, Musia's mother boldly objected. Finally, the dissatisfied boss left the office, looked at the new cleaning lady, and said gently, Okay, work. The work turned out to be not very difficult, and the salary for such a position was quite decent. It was, to some extent, sufficient for life and treatment for my mother. Vika quickly got into the rhythm of the office. She even liked it here. During lunch breaks, she and Katia would often run to Maria Vasilyevna's cozy, flowery kingdom to drink tea and chat with the lonely, bored woman. She greeted them with joy and always presented them with something delicious, a fragrant homemade butter tart or an extraordinary cake made of 1,000 thin layers. It is unknown how long this could have lasted if not for one incident. One day, a group representing a large Chinese phone manufacturing company arrived at the negotiations. It was supposed to be a very large order, and everyone had been preparing for the meeting for a long time and carefully. But the translator, who the company promised to make available, called at the last moment and said he was sick and couldn't come. The administration was in a state of shock due to such force majeure. Vyacheslav Sergeevich feverishly tried to find another translator, but to no avail. Luckily, all my friends were busy. The Chinese were sitting in a meeting room and were circulating around them, offering water or tea. They didn't understand a word, were irritated by the long wait, and tried to leave. Vika realized that she needed to save the situation, approached and spoke to him in good Chinese. Everyone around him gasped in surprise. From the mouth of a simple cleaning lady flowed a language unknown to certified employees. Potential customers were delighted and began to compete with each other to complain to the girl about the circumstances. Vyacheslav Sergeevich got his bearings instantly. He immediately took Victoria by the shoulders and gently sat her down on a chair next to the Chinese. Then the negotiations went like clockwork. The girl regularly translated everything to the smallest detail, but tried to smooth out Vyacheslav Sergeevich's unfortunate joke, which he, for some reason, awkwardly made as a farewell. After escorting important clients to their car, the boss breathed a sigh of relief and called the cleaning lady to his office. "I had no idea that you speak languages so skillfully," he said benevolently, at the same time piercing her with a curious look. "Do you know anything else?" "English and German, and a little French. I studied a foreign language, and, in general, I had skills since I was a child." "That's really good," he said thoughtfully, looking at the girl with his almost black eyes. From that day on, Vyacheslav Sergeevich appointed Victoria as his personal assistant. She liked her new job. She did her best not to disappoint her employer, and he was pleased. And the employees immediately respected her. Good-natured Katia was the happiest. "Congratulations, my friend. I told you, don't lose your temper. There are no desperate situations." The required folder was right in front of the switched-on computer monitor. After briefly looking at the screen, the girl suddenly noticed her close-up image and froze, looking at the photo in amazement. But after looking closely, she calmed down. It was just a still frame from a video of a meeting room, and she accidentally found it. Filming took place last Monday, when the creative team was discussing the future advertising concept for a dairy brand. Vika was surprised. Is Vyacheslav Sergeevich really in control of everything to the point of recording and viewing ordinary preliminary discussions? Next to the video window, a document with some kind of contract was open. After examining it, Vika realized that it was a sales document for a ready-made clothing advertising project, which the entire team had been working tirelessly on for the last month. But just yesterday, Vyacheslav Sergeevich announced that the company that ordered the advertisement refused it. And here is the agreement already signed. Like this? Did he really appropriate other people's ideas? Maybe the famous creative Sonia was right? No, these are just your assumptions. The girl began to calm down. Probably, she misunderstood something. Vika took the blue folder and left the office completely confused, deciding to keep this information to herself. After that incident with the Chinese, the director looked at the girl with completely different eyes. Or rather, he finally noticed her. Having entrusted her with such a serious position, he was firmly convinced that Vika would break his head, but she would do everything he entrusted her with and even more. Such a psychotype, but he understood people. It was no surprise that, at such a young age, he assumed such a respectable position in a large company. And if you add a little of your charm to motivate a girl. Now, as he passed Victoria, he smiled sweetly, and when ordering, he was sure to throw some exquisite compliment her way. The inexperienced girl was flattered by so much attention. The boss isn't such a strict and scary boss, she thought. And why doesn't everyone like him? His presence caused him some excitement. Leaning her head over a document, she smelled his expensive perfume, and her heart shuddered at the man's proximity. And he, as if feeling it, came closer, as if by chance, touching her hand. But Vika understood even without words that he liked her. It was already difficult to hide the bright eyes from others. She secretly shared with Katia about the emerging feeling, hoping to be happy for her friend. But Katia just frowned and said, choosing each word carefully, "It's up to you, of course, but if I were you, I would think 100 times. Vyacheslav Sergeevich, you see, he is a low-hanging fruit for us." Vika just dismissed her envious friend. She doesn't know what he becomes in private. Since Vyacheslav sometimes began to take her home in his car after work, only she knows exactly what kind of real man he is. Outside the agency, he becomes sincere, kind, and vulnerable. On the way, they switched to you and talked about everything in the world. The man was very interested in his mother's health. When saying goodbye, before entering, he always kissed her hand, looking into her eyes with a long, languid look. Vika more than once found herself thinking that she was looking forward to these seemingly random meetings at the exit from the office center. On the way home, she looked at his side profile and discovered that some features reminded her of her father, and that made them look like family. I didn't want to leave through the entrance anymore. Apparently, the man was overcome by similar feelings, and one day, squeezing her hand with his wide palms and not wanting to let go, he complained, sighing sadly, "I really don't want to be alone now, in an empty apartment," and shyly suggested, "Vika, if you are not in a hurry, let's visit me. I will show you how I live. Otherwise, when you leave, it becomes completely sad." A spacious modern studio on the 21st floor of a new building surprised the girl with its
Ambisces interior.
everything here, down to the smallest detail, served the convenience of its experienced bachelor owner, and a bright bar counter next to a huge leather sofa and a huge, biggest TV that Vika had ever seen, and a bed of unusual design, right in front of the panoramic window, in which the night city stretched across the entire room. Wall beneath the skyscraper's feet, lighting up with increasingly new lights for street signs and apartment windows. "It's beautiful, is not it?" asked the owner, deliberately dimming the lights so he could fully enjoy the romantic image outside the window. "I bought this apartment just because of this grand view." "Very," the girl agreed enthusiastically and took the offered glass of champagne in her hand. It shone under the rays of a dim lamp. The bubbles tickled my lips and tongue pleasantly. Here, far from reality, with its eternal hustle and bustle and endless worries, extraordinary happiness was felt. It carefully enveloped and relaxed the entire body, giving a feeling of peace. The sparkling wine made noise in my head, erasing the limits of reality and the framework of rules. I wanted this state to last forever. The young man came from behind and hugged Victoria gently. This gesture harmoniously adapts to the girl's mood and inner state. It got even better and hotter, and pleasant words whispered in his ear only complemented the feeling of complete happiness. That night, Vika stayed with Slavik for the first time. After their relationship moved to a new level, Victoria realized that Vyacheslav began to completely trust her at work. He shared confidential information with her and attributed sensitive matters. Vika, with her excellent student complex, did her best not to lose face and not to disappoint her lover. One day, inviting her to his office, Vyacheslav solemnly announced, "Vikusia, on Saturday I was invited to visit the country by our head of the marketing department, Vitaly Alexandrovich, and I want you to come with me as my girlfriend." Vika held her breath, afraid of scaring the moment. What could this mean? But everything is serious between them. My head was spinning with new perspectives. Here it is. Everything that happens is for the better. It's not for nothing that she broke up with Kostya to find true love. "Of course, I'll go with you," she replied softly, panting. "But I have a request for you," warned the man. "Vitaly Alexandrovich and I are planning a serious conversation, not for women's ears, and his wife is pregnant. Become her companion at night. Sit somewhere together. Talk about your own feminine." The girl shrugged her shoulders and nodded, not understanding what was special about this request. "Fine. No problem. You can totally trust me." "But that's not all." Vyacheslav paused to make it clear that the subsequent information would be very important and continued in a calm, insinuating voice. "You see, In your safe there are documents that are compiled in such a way that they discredit my reputation. He's been holding a grudge against me for a long time. He specifically wants to arm me, take over the company and take my place." Silently, with eyes wide open, Victoria listened attentively, inwardly indignantly condemning the bastard Vitaly Alexandrovich, whose serious appearance never aroused her sympathy. "So," Vyacheslav spoke again, "you must definitely find out the code to the safe from your wife, or force him to open it, and then, in any case, pull out and take out a folder of bright scarlet color with black border." Vika was surprised by such an unusual task. "But wait, how am I supposed to do that?" she exclaimed, raising her eyebrows in bewilderment. "I don't know," the man replied. He came very close to her and took her hand. "I can only trust you in this matter, my closest person." With those words, he pulled his narrow palm up to his face and sensually pressed his lips to it. A shiver ran through the girl's hand and spread throughout her body with a pleasant warmth. She was fascinated, looking at Vyacheslav, unable to utter a word. Only the phrase echoed in my head. The closest person? Vitaly Alexandrovich lived outside the city, in a large two-story mansion hidden among the slender trunks of majestic pines. The wife of the head of the marketing department, Nastia, was a pretty, smiling blonde. She could barely support her huge belly, stopping and straightening her back every now and then. The birth was clearly planned for the next few weeks, maybe even days. We immediately found a common language with Nastia Vika. She turned out to be very sociable and did not stop talking all night, giving tons of all kinds of information about her friends, about a film she had recently seen, about recipes for some amazing dishes from the internet. Apparently, she had been on maternity leave for a long time and missed the company of women. Unlike his talkative wife, Vitaly Alexandrovich was serious and silent. The tall, thin man looked a little older than Vyacheslav Sergeevich. The facial expression betrayed internal tension. After lunch, the men immediately retired to the open terrace and the women settled in the living room. They chatted casually for some time. Vika felt a little nervous, remembering her ambiguous task, but she didn't even need to make any special efforts to silently find out the necessary information. She listened carefully, agreed, and skillfully directed the conversation in the right direction. And now Nastia shows the guest the kitchen and office, and she opens the safe to take out documents with the house plan. Remembering the code was no problem. Suddenly, Vika was overcome by a feeling of guilt in the face of this carefree, chatty, and good-natured young woman. After all, I had to take advantage of her naivety and deceive her. The girl felt like an unpleasant and insidious swindler. But immediately the torrent of excuses in my head overcame the pangs of conscience. Well, it's really her fault that Nastia managed to connect her life with such a greedy scoundrel like Vitaly. Vika simply needs to help her boyfriend and save her reputation. Slava clearly said that her fate depends only on her. And for the sake of her beloved, she is ready to do anything. Therefore, as soon as the pregnant housewife retired to the kitchen, Vika decisively got up, flew to the office and, with a hand trembling with excitement, dialed the coveted code. The door gave way and opened with a silent metallic clang. On the bottom shelf, indeed, was the necessary folder, bright scarlet with black border. The girl put it in a huge bag, which she prudently took with her just for this purpose, slammed the safe, and jumped out of the office to have time to sit down in her previous seat before the beautiful hostess arrived. With great difficulty, she managed to suppress the trembling of her body, so as not to betray the emotions that were overwhelming her. Mentally, she repeated the same mantra in different ways. No, she is not a thief. She is just saving her loved one. Anyone in her place would have done the same. She is doing everything right. Nastia, pale as a wall, staggered into the room. Extreme confusion and confusion were visible on his face. What happened? What is wrong with you? The alarmed Vika rushed to her, suspecting something was wrong. She looked at the guest in fright and whispered with disobedient lips, "It seems to me that this started." She absently looked down and added, "And I also think my water broke." After this sentence, a grimace of pain appeared on her face. She twitched and moaned for a long time. God! Vika couldn't contain her exclamation. She brought the woman in labor to the couch and ran to the terrace for help. The excited men immediately came running. Vitaly Alexandrovich dialed the ambulance number. It was clear from his movements that he was very nervous. The dispatcher answered the call without emotion and immediately informed that the team on duty was already leaving. All that was left to do was wait. Vika sat next to Nastya and held her hand as she writhed in pain. She sincerely felt sorry for the young girl. The future father, tense and restless, walked from corner to corner, looking at his wife in confusion. Only Vyacheslav sat for a while and indifferently looked at this photo and, seeing Vika's purse visibly enlarged, suddenly got up and said, "Well, well, dear, we are superfluous here. The ambulance is coming. Maybe it's time for us to go home." And he looked expressively at the girl. Nastya grabbed Vika's hand and said in a pleading voice, "Don't go, please. I feel a little uncomfortable." This gesture touched the guest to the depths of her soul. She turned to her lover and said, "Glory, you go alone, and then Vitaly Alexandrovich will take me." "Of course, I'll take you," the man exclaimed fervently. "Stay, Vika. It's somehow calmer with you." For the first time, Vika saw confusion in the strong man's eyes. This whole extraordinary situation weighed heavily on Vyacheslav. Unable to find anything to do, he hesitated for a while, then said goodbye to everyone and, sighing with relief, left for the city. About an hour passed, but there was still no ambulance. Nastya lay huddled on the sofa, not letting go of her new friend for a minute, and her husband could not find a place for himself, periodically jumping out of the gate and looking for an ambulance. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore and called the dispatcher again. The same woman answered the call, but this time there was anxiety and excitement in her voice. "Podolsnaya House 18? Yes, yes. We haven't forgotten you," she replied, stuttering. "The fact is that the medical team that answered your call suffered an accident. Now we are looking for a new one. I think they will reach you within 20 to 30 minutes. Wait." But the child didn't want to wait, breaking the embrace of his mother's womb, eager to see the outside world as quickly as possible. Rapid labor began. Nastya no longer moaned, but screamed like an animal, alternating moans with lamentations and prayers. "God, all-merciful, to save, help, don't let me and the child die." The future father, holding his head in his hands, eyes wide with horror, looked at this scene, frozen in place. Vika realized that continuing to do nothing was very dangerous. At the university, they learned in additional classes how childbirth occurs, and she hoped that nature would help them and Nastya. "Vitaly Alexandrovich,
Fast.
where can I get a bowl of hot water, clean towels and sheets?" His commanding tone, which brooked no objection, snapped the man out of his stupor and forced him to react instantly. After undressing the woman in labor, the newly qualified midwife saw with a shudder that the baby's head had already appeared. At this moment, Nastya did not understand anything. Her eyes were bulging with unbearable pain, and she continued trying to get up. I had to yell at her and press her hard into the couch by her shoulders to bring her back to normal. "Nastya, lie down and listen to my voice," Vika said in an orderly tone and, realizing that a new contraction had begun, she continued slowly and measuredly, "Calm down. Now breathe and push.
Come on, come on."
For the child's sake." Surprisingly, the young girl calmed down and obediently followed all the commands. Every now and then, Cries of suffering escaped her lips, but again and again she gathered the last of her strength and continued to push, helping the child to be born. Vika didn't know how much time had passed, but as soon as a warm, slippery lump appeared on the snow-white sheet she held in her hands, a loud, unfamiliar voice was heard behind her. "So, what do you have here? Everyone stay away." Finally, the doctors arrived. A completely healthy boy was born. Vitaly steadfastly kept his promises, and within an hour Victoria was home. They were silent the entire way to the city, but after what happened there was no need to talk. Everything became clear without words. An atmosphere of prosperity reigned inside the car. The girl secretly looked at her new father and saw his inspired and happy face. Listening to her own feelings, she understood that something new, kind, and bright had settled in her soul, and a thin, invisible thread connected them all today. When saying goodbye, the man shook her hand gratefully and said, "Thank you very much, Vika. If it weren't for you—" He paused, imagining with horror what could have been, but immediately came back to reality and smiled at the girl. "Don't blame me, but I'll ask you to be godmother." That same inexplicable, emerging feeling spread like a warm wave throughout my chest. Godmother. For that helpless baby she met in this complex and unpredictable world. This means that now they will be connected for life. This is both a great honor and a huge responsibility. But Vika is not one of the shy ones. "With great pleasure," she replied. Excitedly, she flew to the floor and burst into the apartment. "Mommy, I'm godmother now," she shouted happily from the door. The woman couldn't contain her surprise. "Wait, what's that like?" Vika enthusiastically told everything that happened today. Mom just shook hands. "God, this has to happen. Thank God everything is fine with the baby and Mom." Vika laughed happily, but suddenly her gaze fell on a bag thrown carelessly in the hallway. And then memories of today's unpleasant mission popped into my head. Due to unforeseen circumstances, she never gave the folder to Slava. The mood instantly turned sour, the feeling of guilt returned, but now it began to gnaw at his brain with redoubled force. In the living room, she opened the ill-fated folder and began rummaging through the papers contained within. It was necessary to assess the possible damage. The more she read the content, the more her eyebrows furrowed. Now the whole mosaic has formed in my head. All the pieces came together to recreate the overall image. Vyacheslav deceived his own company. Copies of sales agreements for projects completed through shell companies indicated that the director was selling projects that clients allegedly refused and kept the entire value for himself. There was no doubt. His beloved was an ordinary swindler, and Vitaly Alexandrovich just wanted to bring him to light. An irritated Slavic called and asked, "Well, what do you have there?" "A boy was born," replied Vika. "I don't care about him. What's wrong with the folder? Did everything work out?" The girl was silent and then reassured him. "Yes, I have the folder. I'll bring it to the office tomorrow." The cheerful voice on the other end of the line exclaimed with admiration, "You are my smart girl. I love you. See you tomorrow." Victoria's soul was bitter at the supposition. No, he doesn't love her. He just uses her for his own purposes. After all the upheavals of the day, this unexpected discovery caused neither surprise nor shock. Confusion, disappointment, and a feeling of heartbreak were all she had left before falling into a long, restless sleep. In the morning, my soul was still restless and disgusting. A block from the office, she stopped at a copy shop and, thinking for just a second, confidently pushed the door open. "Vikusia, you are my darling. Come fast." The boss greeted her with a smile on his face and extended his hand impatiently. Vika took a folder out of her bag and placed it on the table. Noticing her concentrated face, the man asked, "What are you doing? Have you already investigated this? Not a single muscle moved on his face. I looked, she said calmly. This is a setup, he blabbed, trying to justify himself. All these documents are false and fabricated against me. Do you believe me? No, she shook her head. You stole designs from the company and sold them, and you used me to cover your tracks? On the man's face, unexpectedly, a cold and predatory expression returned, the same one she saw when she worked as a simple cleaning lady. Well, do you like drinking expensive champagne? He hissed angrily. Eating in the best restaurant? Driving a nice car? You have to pay for all this, he summarized.
Victoria blushed.
I don't want to work for you anymore. I disdain to be with such a person, she exclaimed and headed resolutely towards the door. Well, get out of here, shouted the director. There are a lot of idiots like that. I'll find another one. Without high moral principles, grabbing her bag, she ran out of the office without explaining anything to the employees. Her tears suffocated her. Her heart broke into pieces. God, what a fool she was. I didn't listen to anyone, but people don't talk like that. Vitaly opened the door in surprise and invited the uninvited guest to enter. And Nastia is still in the maternity hospital, he said in confusion. I'm coming to you, Vika said decisively and placed the documents on the table. What is that? The man was surprised. The girl sighed guilty and regretted what she had done. Vyacheslav Sergeevich was silent for a long time, thinking. These minutes seemed endless to the girl. She didn't know what he would do next. Maybe she'll scream and push you away. Well, that'll serve her well. But the man said in a calm tone, Well, I hoped it wouldn't come to that. I wish Slavik would simply return the stolen money to the company and promise to forget about it. I'll have to meet with the board of directors. Vika, you're coming with me. A new suit of strict cut fit his figure perfectly. Fortunately, the black lacquered shoes on my feet had a comfortable fit because I have to walk in them all day. A high position requires compliance with the dress code. Hello, Victoria Andreevna. The employees run to greet her, and Katya, with a cheerful smile, waves to her from afar with both hands. For the second week, Victoria is the head of the marketing department. They hired her, however, for this position on the condition that she completed her studies in absentia. Then in the fall you will have to return to your desk. Vitaly Alexandrovich was promoted. He is now the agency's CEO, and deservedly so. And for a month now no one has heard of Vyacheslav Sergeevich. Well, may God be with him. Without him, everyone is somehow calmer. Since Vika appeared uninvited at Vitaly Alexandrovich's house to return the stolen documents, trust and friendship were established between them. But the girl, however, despite this, tries to maintain subordination, although she feels genuine respect for him. But today, for some reason, the director's office is strangely empty. Vitaly Alexandrovich, she called him on his cell phone, will you be in the office today? Urgent documents need to be signed. The man breathed loudly into the phone and asked in a hoarse voice, Victoria, could you bring them to me after lunch? The front door was open. The man's mood could be unmistakably determined by his grim face. He was sitting on the sofa with a glass in his hand, in which he guessed whiskey. Nearby was an oblong paper envelope. Vitaly Alexandrovich, there is no face on you. What happened? Vika was alarmed. He took a sip of the strong drink and said briefly, looking ahead with detachment, Yes, so. Personal problems. Sorry for the lack of tact, she said calmly, cursing herself for being too talkative. But the man suddenly came to his senses. We agreed to communicate about you. Now you are my friend forever. You helped my son to be born. Having said this, he stopped and said sadly, looking straight ahead, If he's mine, of course. Today the boss surprised me with his oddities. Vika looked at the man with an incomprehensible look, and he, After taking a few more sips from the glass, sighed deeply and made an unexpected confession. Well, the other day my mother let slip that I couldn't have children. I had mumps as a child. I took tests. They sent me the results. I can't open it. I'm scared. Open, he asked. Vika took out a medical report from the envelope, in which the grim diagnosis of male infertility was highlighted in bold letters. The girl didn't dare speak out loud, just held out the paper so he could see for himself. The man lowered his head and stared at the ground. He sat there without moving for several minutes. Vika even feared for her mental health. Vitaly raised his flushed face with burning, drunken eyes to her and declared, "Well, here it is. Everything is falling into place. They are still dating." The man eagerly drained his glass and took his phone out of his pocket. "Look, my friend sent me." He started showing some photos. The girl was embarrassed to refuse her boss and looked at the photos on her cell phone. In some small cafe, at the table, a prettier Nastia and a handsome young man were sitting, hugging each other. Taking a closer look at his familiar features, she gasped. "Kostya?" escaped his lips. "Do you know him?" The jealous husband, in turn, was surprised. He was already quite drunk. "Yes, this is my ex-fiancé, with whom we broke up." What a coincidence, she thought bitterly. And the man jumped up, swinging sideways on unsteady legs, and furious, clenching his fists, shouted hoarsely into the void, "I'm going to kill him, and her, and myself." The alcohol he was drinking was taking its toll. Nastia entered the house, flushed and happy, with a kangaroo backpack on her stomach. The baby was snoring peacefully in it. "Ah, hi, Vika. How are you?" She cheered at her friend at the door. The guest did not have time to respond. Vitaly attacked his wife. "And how are you? With Kostya?" The young woman held her breath and asked cautiously, "Vital, what are you talking about?" He let out a threatening growl and shoved the clinic report under her nose. With a shaking hand, she picked up a sheet of paper and ran her eyes over the lines. Then she froze for a second and started crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's my fault," she lamented through tears. "I wanted to tell you everything, but I was scared. It's not just like that. I love him. I love it so much." After these words, the man became furious and lost control of his own mind. He picked up a vase from the table and threw it straight at the wall. Shards of pottery fell to the floor, and the touch woke the child, who began to cry. The young woman, trembling, hugged her son, protecting him from possible attacks from her deceived husband. Victoria was terribly unpleasant. It was inconvenient to witness family fights, but she could no longer get up and leave at such a tense moment. Seeing how the young mother cowered in fear under the drunken gaze of her enraged husband, the girl realized that she might even need to intervene. She didn't know how Vitaly would react to this painful confession. At that moment, the man grabbed his head with both hands and staggered, even jumped up and ran in time to save the unfortunate sinner with an innocent baby in his arms. But her fears were in vain. He just waved his hands towards the front door and said tiredly, "Go away. Since you love him and not me, go away. God will be your judge." How noble, thought Vika after such an unexpected result, almost like mine and Kostya. In fact, is it really possible to make someone love you? Yes, you can try to keep him close to you, physically, by blackmail, by threats, but it is simply impossible to force him to fall in love. And without this, there is no point in staying together. Of course, there is a habit, gratitude, respect for your partner. But as soon as true love appears on the horizon of destiny, all this fades into the background. Vika understood all this well. Vitaly apparently, too. This man opened up to her from a new side. Only a strong and generous person could do such a thing. A real man. After sleeping and getting ready, Vitaly showed up for work the next morning as if nothing had happened. He was sincerely grateful to the witness of yesterday's misfortune because she did not give any clues about what had happened and did not even show it. This strong and intelligent girl commanded his respect. Over time, it became clear that the sympathy was mutual. Somehow, easily and naturally, a close relationship began between them. Two lonely and suffering souls met in this difficult and furious world and intertwined, harmoniously complementing each other. Happiness rose on tiptoe, silently and imperceptibly. One day, returning home, he found his mother upset and pale. "What happened, Mom?" she asked. She sighed heavily and replied, "Aunt Anya came to visit me today. Sadness is upon her. Kostya has been diagnosed with a serious blood disease. Now only a bone marrow transplant will help." And she began to cry. "Oh ho, what's going on?" "A very young guy." This news saddened the girl. I honestly felt sorry for the guy, because she had already let go of him from her heart a long time ago and no longer held a grudge. All the old love experiences seemed insignificant today. The hand itself reached for the phone and found a familiar contact. "Kostya, hello. Do you recognize it?" Tests have shown that they have good compatibility. On the appointed day, Vika arrived at the hospital and took the elevator to the desired floor. There, the excited Aunt Anya and Nastia were already waiting for her. "Vikusia, darling." They happily ran to hug her. The operation went without complications. At first, the girl was afraid of the upcoming painful manipulation, but the anesthesiologist turned out to be a magician and a wizard. The pain was not felt. She just stood there and stared at the shiny tiled walls of the operating room. A warm, all-encompassing feeling grew in my soul. It gives life to a person. How accurately a famous writer wrote long ago. How surprisingly the deck is shuffled. Now she is godmother to her ex-lover's son, and the sinister rival who once stole him is her friend. Thanks to Vika, the young man will live and the new family will be happy. After resting for a while, Vika prepared to leave. Downstairs in the corridor, Vitaly was waiting for her. He didn't want to go upstairs, lest he meet his ex-wife and her lover. Apparently, the emotional wounds were still very fresh. The elevator didn't want to go to her floor, and Vika decided to slowly walk down the stairs. It was quiet and deserted here. All the hustle and bustle of the hospital remained behind the tightly closed doors of the departments. On one of the landings, with a sign that said, "Children's Department," a child of about 3 years old suddenly looked out from behind the door. Upon seeing a girl coming down the stairs, the boy came out and looked at her with huge blue eyes. He studied her with such a serious expression on his face that Vika couldn't help but smile and, approaching her, stopped. "Hello," she told the curious baby. "Are you my mother?" he asked suddenly. The girl raised her eyebrows in surprise. Then a nurse looked from the department and exclaimed, "Where are you?" "Oliza, let's have lunch in the dining room, quickly." But he calmly turned to her and declared in a professional manner, "Mom came to see me." The nurse gave Vika a strange look and repeated, "Run to lunch. Mom will come again." The big-eyed boy took the girl's hand and whispered, "I'll wait for you." This childishly sincere phrase made Vika's heart beat faster and sent shivers down her spine. As soon as the boy disappeared behind the department door, the girl asked the elderly nurse, "Where is your real mother?" "Who knows?" the woman said and explained, "Olshek is from an orphanage. We have been suffering from anemia for 2 weeks. A good child, but very serious for his age." This strange incident was engraved in the girl's head. It was impossible to forget that piercing look of incredible blue eyes on a pale face and a calm voice that penetrated to the very marrow of the bones. "I will be waiting for you." Several months have passed since Vicky and Vitaly's wedding, but they never discussed the issue of offspring. By tacit agreement, this thread has been banned. The girl loved her husband for who he was, but she couldn't help but try. How do you feel about the idea of adopting a child from an orphanage? On the large green lawn, a tent stood out like a bright blue dot. Behind him was a white minibus, and nearby was a folding table with an umbrella, around which tourists sat on chairs. In their hands they held mugs of tea, exuding a dazzling aroma of herbs and wild fruits. Vitaly and Vika were relaxed and cheerful. They have been on vacation for almost a week, and it is already the third day of their long-awaited nature vacation. Finally, you can dedicate all your time to your children. After all, they grow very quickly. For example, Olshek will go to first grade this fall. But recently, it seems, small and shy, pale-faced, he stood indecisively on the threshold of his enormous mansion, gazing in awe at the mountain of toys his new mother and father had prepared for his arrival. And today he is already a rather tall and rosy-cheeked boy for his age, who joyfully and kindly teases his younger sister Zaneka, who was taken from the orphanage last year. Vika looked tenderly and lovingly at her contented husband and playful children. The realization of the last years of my life came to mind. What a blessing it is to have a friendly family. Even so, dreams do come true. Sooner or later. Maybe it's not as it seems at first sight. Everything we do is for the better.